This is the Linux of the new financial system, um, and or I guess the Unix kernel of the new financial system. And in doing so, it's going to need to take massive loads, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where we are right now, is trying to figure out really how to account for thousands, hundreds of thousands of payments in a matter of minutes or an hour. Like just really, really dense usage of it.
I live unbanked off of cryptocurrency, and I use Bitrefill extensively because it lets me pay with crypto at places that don't yet accept it directly. This one service, more than any other, helps me live on crypto, pay your prepaid phone bill, or buy gift cards to thousands of major retailers around the world, all with cryptocurrency, including for exact amounts so you don't have to buy more gift credit than you need for a specific purchase. You can use Bitrefill without an account, but if you get an account, you can earn rewards points, which translate to savings, and you can also hold a balance denominated in dollars or euros to protect yourself against market crashes. Go to bitrefill.com, click Create Account, and enter the referral code DCN, or follow the link in the description. Hey everyone, I have the wonderful pleasure of speaking with the one and only Guy Swann of the Bitcoin Audible. How's it going, man?
Awesome. It is going wonderful. How about you?
It's going pretty well, and uh, basically, I put out as one does in the decentralized world, where in the centralized world you get to say, I want to learn about something, I'm going to go talk to the CEO of whatever. But in the decentralized world, you kind of have to. It's kind of like doesn't quite work like that. So I put out a call a few weeks ago, whatever it was, saying, hey, does anyone know a lot about the Lightning Network, specifically for Bitcoin, that I can kind of pick their brain and answer a lot of questions, not just like how does it work in the short term, but also just what are the possibilities and what are limitations and what are trade-offs and kind of grander scale type things. And so one of my Facebook friends is your brother, and he says, oh, my brother knows a lot about this stuff. So I was like, cool. So then that's kind of where it hit. So first off, what is your background relevant to Lightning? And it could just be, I'm a podcast guy who just uses it a bunch and read very deeply into it.
Basically that is I've and I did do the programming Lightning
Mm-hmm.
workshop with Pierre Richard in New York,
Mm-hmm.
which was really fun, and it's mostly just like kind of working with the libraries of L&D, and but for the most part it's that like I've had to dig really, really deep into it. I mean, read the white paper way back in 2015, like right when it landed, really. And like right when it dropped, I had a really hard time. Like it was as difficult to grasp conceptually as Bitcoin was when I first
Mm-hmm.
found it. Like it was just a lot of moving parts, and to kind of imagine like how it was going to unfold, how it would build out, how it would scale, what you could actually do with it. It was really, really interesting. Like security model, everything about it just fascinated me. And at some point, it just kind of clicked, and I've read since, I don't know how many pieces. I mean, hell, I've probably done 50 of them on the show, on the
Mm-hmm.
podcast. Read and then kind of dug into the concepts and tried to better explain them. Probably still my favorite to this day is just digging into the actual Lightning protocol itself.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Van Werdum had a great piece, or a great series on Bitcoin Magazine, of just understanding Lightning Network. And it was just part 1, 2, and 3. And he really just does a deep dive into how the keys work, how the payments are routed, how it creates a network, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, with that, I've just done that. I've run a couple of my own nodes, a big user of Breeze and Sphinx and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things like that. Every time there's something new, I try to jump on it immediately, start playing, start testing, all of it.
Yeah, and so for people who, I'm sure most people listening to this have heard the term Lightning or Lightning Network, or at least definitely know what Bitcoin is, of course. But so to just quickly recap for people who say, hey, I heard this Lightning thing. It's like how people send and receive Bitcoin or something, but that's all I know. Like, what is Lightning? How would you describe it, like, shortly?
So it's a decentralized payment network on top of Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
It uses Bitcoin's ownership like the model of Bitcoin security as kind of a bedrock to establish network connections. So
Mm-hmm.
kind of like how your IP address is used to find other people with IP addresses, and then you route through all the available servers to find that person and basically lock a connection with them.
Yeah.
Lightning is kind of that for Bitcoin payments. Um, so you use your diehard foundational ownership of a Bitcoin address, and you connect it to someone else so that you can update it into this network of thousands, millions of other connections between other people. And basically, you can bounce around this ownership on a higher layer without having to broadcast Bitcoin transactions. Um, so hopefully that kind of paints an image that's not so
Yeah.
complicated.
So basically, from, I guess the understanding of the way cryptocurrency works, it's a digital ledger. There are, coins or units of account in certain places, and whoever controls the cryptographic keys to that is basically the owner of the funds. And whenever you send a transaction, it just says from this account, roughly speaking, right? This address to this one. And so when you put them on the Lightning Network, when you access the Lightning Network, you have to move them in some way to get started with that. Is that right?
Yes. So it's a little bit like a lot of people like refer to it as locking up your Bitcoin on the
Mm-hmm.
Lightning Network. Um, but I think that's like kind of a really bad way to imagine it, because when you put Bitcoin onto the Lightning Network, it's actually far more capable.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually do a lot more with it because it's not got the restrictions, the heavy limitations on the Bitcoin network that are about making sure that the ownership is yours. So, that's got a very small attack surface and therefore is limited in its nature. You don't want it to
Mm-hmm.
do a whole lot. So, I kind of think of it like, you're locking it up in the same sense that you lock yourself in a car, but it's so that you can get other places faster
Mm-hmm.
and you can do other things as opposed to walking, which is severely limited.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, you basically lift your Bitcoin up into this other network, then you can do a whole lot of things with it. And but your ownership is still based on ultimately what the Bitcoin network says.
Yeah. So one thing that I've found relatively easy to understand are two-way payment channels where, say, I'm sending something to you, but I want to do it in a million times, but not do a million blockchain transaction times. So I basically put it in some kind of custody where both of us share the keys in some way. Again, be very,
Hmm.
simplistic here. And then on the second layer is when you transact, and at the end of whatever period of time, then it just settles finally, and then you get some, I get some, or I get all, you get all, depending on how it works. So it's two parties sort of sharing the keys in a, simplistic kind of a way. With
Hmm.
Lightning, is it still just one part you and then another party, or are there multiple parties, or how does that part work?
Funny enough, you can actually do it with multiple parties, but essentially it's starting with just two parties.
Mm-hmm.
Just because two parties is simpler and you get the security model worked out and all the bugs worked out at that point, and then you can start adding three, four, five parties to some of these arrangements. But it's kind of like having um, like a decent way to think about it, that kind of gives you explicit limitations that make sense, is that like when you connect to your ISP
Mm-hmm.
to like for your internet, you have like an amount of allocated bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're like, okay, you're gonna max out at 300 megabytes or something like that,
Yeah.
or a gigabyte. Um, well, this is like that for finance. Is
Mm-hmm.
whenever you connect to someone into the Lightning Network, and it doesn't really matter, like just like an ISP, you could pick any ISP in the world. All you just need is a connection to the internet, and then you can traverse the whole internet, right?
Yeah.
Um, the beauty of an LSP of connecting
Mm-hmm.
into the Lightning Network is that you don't have a geographic limitation. So
Mm-hmm.
where you might have one option in your local area or two for the internet, you can connect to any Lightning node anywhere in the world. It's cyberspace, right? There
Yeah.
are no yards or roads that you have to worry about. Um, and But when you connect into it, based on that, it's referred to as a channel, but based on how much you put in there, that's your bandwidth. So, if you put $10,000 in there, well, then the most anybody can move back and forth at any one time in that specific connection
Yeah.
is $10,000. Um, but you can move it through your LSP, through the person that you're connecting to anyone else in the network using the connections that they have with the next guy and they have with the next guy. So it routes through many different servers, just like your internet connection does, and is encrypted along the way and then finds its destination. It's actually incredibly similar to how TCP/IP routing works on the internet, which is kind of the cool thing about it, is that we really already know all the routing limitations and a lot of the protocols, like the concept and design of the protocols.
Yeah.
It's just in a completely new space with a new new foundation for it.
Yeah, so a few things of it seem pretty similar, pretty dissimilar with the way standard Bitcoin transactions work. Where, for example, I could send any amount of Bitcoin to someone. There's any amount that I actually control that is my possession to anyone. And at the same time, I can also send it to anyone in the world. Like if someone has a Bitcoin wallet and I got some Bitcoin, I can send them any amount that I have to anyone, and it doesn't really make a difference. Now it
Yeah.
seems like with Lightning, there's been a few other limitations. For example, how much you can send might be a little bit different. The way I bumped into this was I was trying on a couple of these wallets and I was unable to receive funds because I didn't already have some funds in a channel, and that was a little bit confusing, as we can hit that in a bit. But also, the thing that does make more sense is instead of just sending direct to someone, you have to have a connection to the person. If you don't have a connection to the person, you have to have a connection to someone who does have a connection to the person. So it has to go zip, 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 zip through a few different nodes to find someone. Sort of like a connecting train line for those of who's used those like metro systems, where this line doesn't connect to there. You can't get to there from here, but you can get to the other thing that can get you to there from here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, the one thing I haven't wrapped my head around quite is why, if you don't have any funds, you can't receive any funds. Do you know why that is? Or in some circumstances, I guess.
Yeah. So it's based on like every individual channel, particularly since like the current condition is that it's always just you and someone else. Let's say I've got a Lightning node, and you have connected to me to be your entryway into the Lightning network, and you've established no other connections, so it's entirely dependent on me. Um, if I don't match any, like if you open a channel with $1,000 and you have $1,000 worth of Bitcoin in it, let's do 1,000,000 sats or something like that.
Yeah.
You own all 1,000,000 sats. Well, then I can't push anything in the channel to you because you already have it all. So within that channel, within Lightning, you can't receive any funds, but your bandwidth is expired until you send money out. Now, that's where a liquidity market is really important, because this one of the most important things to realize about Lightning is that it is a market. It is a financial network that needs inputs and outputs. Like it needs money flows on it.
Yeah.
It's not static like a Bitcoin address. So in doing so, there are services that do multiple things, and there are going to be ways to kind of the cool thing about some of the new technologies is that you can actually automate this process with like Lightning Pool, which we'll get to in a bit. But basically have it so that if you are receiving funds that you don't have the balance for, you can automatically have it. So like Breeze is a great example of this. The wallet is that you will receive that payment as if it was already on Lightning, and they will take a 0.1% fee to automatically open a new channel with you.
Yeah.
So whereas your current channel has a limit of 1,000,000 sats and you own all 1,000,000 sats, let's say you're trying to receive a 100,000 sat payment. Well, they're going to automatically open up a 200,000 sat channel with you, and take a 0.1% fee that you'll agree to just have it automatically instantly fund in your wallet. And you won't know that all this is happening on the back end. You just immediately receive the payment as if there was never an issue.
Yeah.
But at this beginning phase, when there's not, when that's not like widespread adopted, um, right now it just says payment failed,
Yeah.
because there's no backup plan essentially when no immediate route is found. But what you would have to do is you'd have to send 500,000 sats out, either buy something, or you can use a service that will turn it that will replace your Lightning Bitcoin with Bitcoin on chain. Like they'll just send you a
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin transaction, and you send them a Lightning transaction,
Mm-hmm.
and now you have 500,000 capacity new bandwidth to receive.
Yeah, it's so that's the thing that kind of has struck me a little bit is because obviously I heard random things flown around the internet, years ago when Lightning first came around, when people first started to use it, and I noticed that obviously like the architectural basis for the network doesn't seem to have changed so much, but the
Mm-hmm.
experience, there's been a lot of development on that front. For example, the whole you have to keep your node online in order to receive a payment at all. And I
Mm-hmm.
noticed a couple things. And first off, I noticed that a few of these apps that are, their own Lightning nodes will sort of run in the background on your phone. And so, like, very few people turn off their phones for any period of time at all, except to restart for updates. So it seems like even though that limitation of the network might still be there, you don't really feel it as an end user if you have a phone that does something or app that does something like that. And then there's also talk about stuff like a lightning rod, which is some sort of a connection you can kind of create to be able to then receive funds when you're still offline. So do you know much about that thing? I think you called it by a different name before, but the lightning rod or whatever it is, the offline payment receiver that, beyond just having, a background service running on the phone.
Yeah. So, kind of the beauty of Lightning, like everything in Lightning is first an engineering problem. Like
Mm-hmm.
all those things, like being able to receive offline. And I tried to hit this and it sucks because
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, when there's no explicit solution to it yet, you're saying, oh, there will be a solution.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, obviously there will be. Like if there's any incentive to use, like the incentive to use Bitcoin is very high. The incentive for low cost is also very high. Therefore, if there's a solution, it will be found. And there's not really anything we can't program on Lightning in a general sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really just an engineering problem to figure out what that middle step is. So
Mm-hmm.
everything is first an engineering problem, and I feel like we've really sorted out all of the major pieces of the engineering. Now it's a market problem to implement it, get it in all the clients, get it standardized, and get liquidity and basically available uh, users and nodes to provide these services on the network. And that's actually moving. Both of those things are moving at a grueling pace because, I mean, updates are coming constantly, and every one of them is already missing the next really important update. um,
Yeah.
so it's pretty crazy. But Lightning Rod is so first off, the issue of like being always online,
Mm-hmm.
I was never really all that concerned about because basically in some form or fashion we are all already
Mm-hmm.
always online. It just kind of is. The internet is, we're connected to it all the freaking time now. um and but the Lightning Rod, the other name I gave it was a hodl HTLC. um and basically, the Lightning Rod is a way to utilize that function. But basically, it's a HODL HTLC is every payment on Lightning is referred to as an HTLC right now.
Mm-hmm.
And what it basically means is that, like, let's say we're routing through somebody, I'm sending a payment to you, but my LSP, the person that I connect to into Lightning, is Bob, and then Bob is connected to you as well. So I'm sending it to Bob first, and then to you. Well, what we do is we have an encrypted channel because we know each other's pub keys and we're
Mm-hmm.
talking. Our clients are talking to each other. Well, you send me a secret. You send me like a secret passphrase, essentially. And I send a secret. I mean, I send a payment to Bob
Mm-hmm.
locked with that secret. And he doesn't know it. He has no idea what it is. He's not in our encrypted channel. And then he sends the payment on to you with encrypted by that same secret. So if you want it, you have to give up the secret. And that's when you give up the secret to Bob, and that's the only way to get the payment. So you receive the payment, but in doing so, you give the secret to Bob that he can then give to me to redeem in our channel. So both transactions either go through or not. Like there's no halfway mark. The only way to receive the payment is to give up the secret that lets the other payments go through. A HODL HTLC is a little bit different. What it does is first you share a secret with me, you give me a secret, and then before we do an invoice, we just do like a completely separate secret. Then you send me the invoice for a payment, and I share. Oh God, what's the best way to explain this without getting really complicated?
Yeah.
It's going to get in the weeds really quick. So I share a secret with Bob. Simplified version. I write a payment to Bob, and you write a payment to Bob that have separate secrets.
Yeah.
But the both of them are redeemable by the first secret. One of them is redeemable by the second secret.
Yeah.
And what this allows is that Bob can hold the payment for us. And we can have a different set of agreements in that payment. So let's say I'm sending $50 to you through Bob, is that we have the normal payment that goes 50-50 if everything, 50 to Bob, 50 to you, if everything goes through smoothly. Or we have this kind of a backup payment that says 50 to Bob. If you're not around, pay Bob an extra penny, and he'll wait until you come online and then send you $49.99.
Yeah, so it's sort of like dropping the package off at the neighbors if you're not home, and then when you come back,
exactly. And you're paying a tiny fee in order for them to do that, because they're just locking up that $50 until you come back. And then that's got an expiration as well. So, if they do it for a day or 2 days or something and you never come back, it's like, okay, I'm going to refund. So that's kind of the secret. But the beautiful thing about that is that what you're doing is you're establishing that a second secret can be tied to every payment, which allows you to basically do anything. That secret can be the output of an application. That secret can be an entirely new smart contract. That secret can be attached to the opening of a separate channel in a new location. So it can be an atomic swap to like normal Bitcoin. It can be an atomic swap to something on some other chain. But it just provides an extra step where we can pause the payment for a second at some service provider and then have something else in the world or on Bitcoin or some other exchange take place. And then it lets it continue forward. It's being used for a lot of different things. This is actually the same trick that Breeze is using to, when I was talking about earlier that you didn't have the enough money in your bandwidth to receive a new payment. Well, that's the trick that Breeze is using, is they're holding that payment, and then you write a new one that says, all right, how about you pay me a 0.1% fee, and I'll open up a new channel. Then they broadcast a new channel, your thing checks it and gets the secret, and then you receive the payment. So your client is doing 2 extra steps instead of just the one normal step, and validating it all. But on your side, you just see that your payment went through the first time, your payment went through the second time.
Yeah, exactly.
The other one has a slightly higher fee because you didn't quite have the bandwidth available.
Yeah, it's so obviously, first off, for those who not, in case everyone didn't kind of notice this, it seems like Lightning Network isn't just like a little extra little add-on. It seems it's almost like its own new network, its own new whole ecosystem.
Absolutely.
And as such, it's very, kind of different. And of course, the number one reason people were ever talking about Lightning to begin with is, of course, scaling. That it's a better scaling solution, or can add, or can help, or whatever that is. So what are the actual scaling limitations of Lightning? Because obviously nothing in the world is infinite, but some things are more optimized for different things. And so how big can this thing get as far as, how many users, how many transactions roughly? Like, is this is scalable? Like, basically, what are the limitations on this thing scaling?
Technically, there isn't a limit. Obviously, practically, nothing is infinite, like you said.
Yeah.
But this is where you get into like for instance, like in the context of payments, like I have a pretty decent sized channel with Sphinx. Let me open this up real quick. Um, and I'm not sure if you can see that. Let me see if I can get this right. Um,
Yeah, I see a bunch of send and receives.
yeah, and like this is literally like I scrolled down last night just kind of looking through it. This is people streaming money to me by listening to my podcast. So these payments are like by the minute that this is happening.
So every minute they
Um,
send you another little bit of stuff.
like yeah, a number of people have it got it set at 3 sats per minute to listen to my podcast. And then it just streams in all day. Like I just scrolled like 5 or 6 times. It's still just yesterday noon that all those payments have come in. So that is already scaled to. I mean, scrolling through like 8 or 9 different things of this, like I only get back to like this Monday. So that's already scaled like 1,000x just
Yeah.
in general like payments because we're able to actually do streaming payments with this. Now the limitations are in the fact that if you don't have the bandwidth available, only so many people can open up new channels at once. When we're talking about explicit 2-to-2 channels, because Bitcoin has a limitation for how many inputs and outputs can happen in any one block.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of what's referred to as layer 3 is multi-party channels. And what that does is that like you, me, my brother, and Bob all open up essentially one collective channel and like one 4 of 4 multi-sig. And then we write additional 2 of 2 channels really quickly with each other offline. So the 2 of 2 channels are redeemable on top of the 4 of 4. And what this means is that we can actually close and open channels within our little group as much as we need to.
Yeah.
But if one of us wants to leave the group, then we have to reform the whole channel. But it's a huge efficiency boost. In fact, the paper that detailed out channel factories that once you get into like 20 and 30 people, which for businesses and banks and like payment services, people who want to dedicate nodes, that's actually not a huge risk, particularly because they can batch the closing and opening of these things, which is going to save them a lot of money because they're splitting that fee with everybody else. And you've got an established Lightning presence. So what easier way to split the fee than on Lightning?
Of course.
But you're looking at like 95% space savings on opening and closing all of these channels because you can open individual channels off chain and then so you can rebalance without even having to go back to Bitcoin. So it's really fascinating the scope that this can actually move to, and because the security model is really kind of getting fleshed out and it's getting more and more robust as time goes on, I think we'll see that far more often, specifically between like very high rated nodes and well-known companies. Like I expect to see the first sort of like multi-party channel between like Fold, Bitrefill, Strike, and Bitfinex or something like that. And they've got like a 10 Bitcoin pool that they're open and closing channels like crazy with each other.
Yeah.
And that's going to create. It's basically a really good example of how to think about it. Is that like every node is like a roundabout, and all the channels are roads like connecting to each other. So what this basically does is this creates a giant roundabout that gets to create and destroy roundabouts as needed to find the best path for payments through the network. And at the end of the day, you can probably get like you could probably get millions of people onboarded by the hour
Yeah.
when you're talking about layer three in
Hmm.
this thing. When you're really talking about like how to roll this out, because you remember everything is basically one UTXO, like one transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain for a channel
Hmm.
right now. But then you're talking about potentially, and with something like Taproot, where the signature isn't any bigger when you have 30 signatures as opposed to
Hmm.
one signature. Like, so that's a huge benefit for
Yeah, of
exactly these
course.
sorts of systems. Um, is to be able to onboard essentially 20 businesses at once with a single transaction that then offline open up hundreds, maybe thousands of channels with users
Hmm.
that are ethereal until, like confirmed later or something. Basically the turbo channel or whatever that they talk about.
Yeah, so
Um,
the the kind of limitations where you run into things is, let's just say you have too many payments going through some kind of node or channel and there just isn't enough liquidity, so therefore that node has to beef up its liquidity or its bandwidth or whatever in order for payments to go through that, otherwise they'll have to go through something else. Is that kind of where the limitations would run into, like the natural limitations of the network?
yeah, I think really the big limitations right now aren't in are less in liquidity so much than they are with the hardware dealing with enough requests.
Hmm.
Like that's where Strike, I think, has the biggest issues when they get like a flood of these things. And he was just talking about it because they'll offer up these like really good discounts on like Bit Refill or something just to stress test. What
Hmm.
happens if 1,000 people try to make a payment in the next 2 minutes? Um, and they're just like the RAM on their node overloads, and even though they have a direct channel, like things will start to hiccup, because this is infrastructure,
Yeah.
right? This is the Linux of the new financial system, um, and or I guess the Unix kernel of the new financial system. And in doing so, it's going to need to take massive loads. And that's
Hmm.
where we are right now, is trying to figure out really how to account for thousands, hundreds of thousands of payments in a matter of minutes or an hour, like just really dense usage of it. But once that kind of bedrock is laid, um, incentives to move in one direction or another are actually um, like with the Lightning liquidity pool and these other things to basically offer up payments. We basically just need a market established for liquidity, which is increasingly coming into its own right now.
Hmm.
And the fulfilling of payments won't really be the issue. And most payments will happen on Lightning anyway. So the opening and closing of channels, I would expect to be more reliable in the short to medium term, I think.
Yeah, so we're talking about two different, I guess, transactional models between Bitcoin and Lightning, which probably factors into why there's different scaling limitations. Because, with Bitcoin, if ever you got a node, and the node has to propagate all the transactions across the entire network of nodes, and then it ends up being included in a block. And so, if there's too much going through these nodes, then the node requirements for anyone running a node go up. And then in order to run a node that works, then it becomes difficult for just any individual to run a node. And it seems like, from my understanding, from what I'm hearing, Lightning's thing is there are still natural limitations to stuff, but not every node has to kind of carry the network's upper bandwidth limit of capacity. Whereas you could have a small node, and if for example there's a ton of traffic, it can go through a bigger node and you can still run your node and it still works. It's not like
Yeah.
that, kind of like everything has to be equal on, or more or less, on the Bitcoin blockchain directly, because it's every transaction is the business of everyone on the network.
Yeah.
Whereas with Lightning, it's only the business necessarily of the people involved in that payment route. Is that kind of where I'm understanding it?
Yes. Yes. Ethernet
Mm-hmm.
was the broadcast layer of the internet,
Yeah.
and it could only scale to so many. devices or computers,
Mm-hmm.
because every single person had to receive every single message, and then sort through which one was supposed to be for it. Obviously, if that
Yeah.
was still the case, our mobile phone would explode into flames
Mm-hmm.
the second we connected it to the internet.
Of course.
Um, so TCP/IP was the unicast layer. Only the nodes that are explicitly needed to get your message from your computer in your house to Berkeley, California, to make a Google search. Only the 9 servers between here and there are needed in order to be involved in that at all. My computer doesn't see it, and neither does anybody else.
Yeah. So when we talk
That's
about
unicast.
uh, security models and stuff. So one of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons why people love Bitcoin is because for a lot of people, it could be one of the single greatest sources of truth in modern technology, where you have a private key to something, you can look up and you can move your own coins and no one else can stop you. And more importantly, you look at something on the blockchain and you just say, okay, if I send out a transaction, it got propagated to, let's just say, around 10,000 nodes or so around the world instantly. And then a miner put it in a block, and then more miners confirmed it, and it built on that, and it's just set in stone. Anyone can look it up. It's perfect transparency, and it's just pretty much irreversible. I mean, you can 51% tax stuff, but by now the momentum of the Bitcoin blockchain is pretty significant to make that a lot harder. And
Mm-hmm.
also, the further back in the chain, the harder it is to just then roll back, kind of thing. So that's like, the security proposition of Bitcoin is, wow, this is no, this is ironclad. As long as you don't get someone hacking in your phone, taking your private keys or whatever, this is pretty ironclad. So how does Lightning compare to that?
So Lightning is explicitly around taking advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
Lightning essentially uses Bitcoin as its courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever something goes wrong, it asks that ironclad Bitcoin ownership who is in the right, and
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin decides. Um, and basically, so the way I like to think about Lightning is, people say it's like an IOU. It's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
it is, calling it an IOU is about the least uh, explicative,
Mm-hmm.
least useful possible way to explain it. Like, what you have in a Lightning channel is explicitly behind your keys, and your keys only.
Mm-hmm.
They are not behind your counterparty's keys. It's in a reserve address that has both of your keys, but both of you can only redeem your own coins from those. What it does is it trades off, um, in order to get instant settlement, so that you don't have to wait for confirmations, and in order to get extremely fast and cheap payments, it trades off with the amount of time you need for Bitcoin to confirm who the owner is.
Mm-hmm.
So you set up a full reserve. The reason you can't receive after you've got a million sats in a channel, the reason you can't receive more is because it's fully reserved.
Mm-hmm.
You can't rehypothecate Bitcoin on the Lightning Network. It's either there or it's not.
Yeah.
Uh, so in order to when you lock up funds in a channel, they're behind your key, but you basically have an insurance contract that, even though there are past payments that your counterparty, let's say we have a channel together, we have made payments in the past in which you owned all the million sats, but then later on, I have all the million sats. You could still technically, you still have the data from those old transactions, so you could broadcast those to the Bitcoin blockchain, and they are valid. But in order to update our the state of our ownership in the future, you had to give up the keys to those old ones.
Mm-hmm.
So it's as if you were sending Bitcoin to an address in which you already gave me the seed, but you specifically have a clause in your redemption of that says, if I don't agree to it, you got to wait a day. So you're going to have to wait a day by holding all of the cheating transaction
Yeah.
in an address that or in a transaction that's been broadcast, so it doesn't actually go to the address. It's sitting there waiting for the time lock, in which I have the full seed of all the coins because you gave it to me. And when you broadcast that transaction, there's this one little piece of the piece of it that I did not have, so that I can't steal it just normally. And you had to give up that last little piece in order to try to cheat me. So now I have a day to go to the Bitcoin court and be like, ha ha ha, those are my coins.
Yeah.
And that's why it's the referred to as the always online problem, is that if I'm offline for a day, technically you could steal my coins. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
slightly higher risk, obviously, than holding it in a Bitcoin address. But the risk to you is that you lose everything, not just the amount that you are
Mm-hmm.
you own, or excuse me, the amount that you were trying to take from me, but all of it, everything that you owed, you actually did own in our channel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a fully reserve contract with an insurance policy and a fail safe in the case that anything goes wrong.
Yeah. So we're talking about, two different layers. So first off, whenever you go on chain, whenever you go from on chain to, off chain, right? Whenever you go on chain to Lightning, there is a on chain transaction involved. And so that's, round about now, like $3 to $5 or whatever, like that. And so when you do that, then you're kind of you're plugged in. It's kind of like opening an account, I guess. It's like you pay a fee, you're in, and then everything is cheap and it's great. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I read this article by the guy who does Breeze Wallet. He was talking about holding on Lightning. And basically, I mean, the idea from the way I was understanding it is there's a lot of efficiency gains for transactions and stuff if you transact on Lightning versus on chain. And so the idea was to just never go off chain, never go back to the main chain. It's not like you don't hold those keys anymore, but just don't move things at all. And it kind of, so for example, let's just say you decide to settle a transaction on chain every single month. And I mean, if there's, millions and millions of people or possibly billions who are using this, even though you only put one on-chain transaction a month, that can be a lot and that can be expensive over time. So why do maybe you just keep it in Lightning? So first off, what do you think of the idea of people keeping most of their Bitcoin, or a lot of people keeping their Bitcoin on Lightning and just never settling on chain? So first off, what do you think of that? And how does the security model of just being in a Lightning only world compare to one where you occasionally settle back into the physical world, as it were, of regular on-chain Bitcoin?
Gotcha. So, as far as how do I like that idea, it's something that I am trying to do more of.
Mm-hmm.
After having, played around with this for a really long time, I've got a BTC Pay server node that I've had running for quite some time. And honestly, like, I have an amount allocated that is generally how much I want to spend.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like, it's a great way to think about it, is like a checking and a savings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so if I'm under, I think I have like
Mm-hmm.
$4,000 roughly. And that's because it went up from about $2,200.
Yeah, which is always a nice problem to have.
It's a nice problem to have.
Mm-hmm.
And I intend to up that quite a bit, because as this starts to, first off, I've never really closed the channel. The only channels I've closed, like if the channels are actually operating, like if the
Mm-hmm.
other node is active and it routes a payment every now and then I don't really see, like, I don't see why I would close.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't need to close every month for any particular reason. Like, in fact, the longer that channel is open, the more certain I am about the fact that I don't have to worry about the state of the channel. Like, it's getting more and more secure. My reserves are deeper and deeper into the blockchain. So just like that ownership of, holding coins or whatever,
Yeah.
if any 51% attack ever hits the network, or there's ever a problem for a couple of hours, I know my channel is fine
Mm-hmm.
because it's been on there for months. But as soon as I refresh it, I'm kind of like back at that risk, right?
Yeah.
Like I now have to kind of worry about that. So as long as the channel is still operating and people are still using it, it's like, why close it? But if the node goes offline that I opened it with, and they were just doing it to tinker, and they opened up like a channel with $5 or something like that, those are the ones that I end up closing, because I'm like, ugh, this is not really helpful to me. I'm not going to send a whole bunch of $2 payments. That this channel is just ram hog for my node. Um, but I fully intend to have a handful of really big channels.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to keep, I want to keep a good chunk on Lightning. Like if I need to receive a big payment, uh, I would like to have it on Lightning. I use Lightning all the time now. I pay my guy who does the formatting and works for the posts in Lightning every week. I I buy my brother's stuff all the time when we're doing like joint things. Like I just got a hotel room, well, not a hotel, but like a paid for our Airbnb for New Year's, and he paid me back over Lightning. We both use Strike and Breeze and Fold. I get Fold, like all my Christmas shopping has been done over
Yeah.
Lightning. Pay my website guy, and I mean, like literally, I use it about damn much as more probably than my debit card. Um,
Yeah,
I, I
what do you think of the possibility of a world where there's a lot of Bitcoin users that never actually have the experience of transacting on chain? As in, they either buy from an exchange or they get paid from a Lightning channel to just pure Lightning wallet, and that's like all they use. They've never touched on chain. They don't. They kind of might hear that it exists, but it's kind of more of a myth to them that pretty much everyone uses just Lightning and hasn't even touched on chain. Is that something that we should strive for? Is that a good thing? Is that a problem in any way? Is it bits of both? How do you see that?
I actually see that as a great thing. Because it would basically mean, I think it's totally a issue of how large the payments are.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody's moving $100,000, they're probably never going to do it on Lightning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I take that back. Actually, I think in going out 5 or 10 years, there will be those sorts of payments on Lightning.
Yeah.
But that doing so on chain will be just as cheap, maybe even cheaper, because that's a huge amount of capacity on stuck,
Mm-hmm.
stuck channels, like on established connections on Lightning. So it's moving balance is like crazy. Um, but the benefit there would be that you get to do it instantly. So there will be big trades that I think from Bitfinex to Coinbase, or from Coinbase to Huobi and China or whatever, who are trying to get across borders and they want to arbitrage like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to use Lightning. Um, and but with users who are doing their normal checking stuff, it's like saying, like you've got, $20,000 in savings that you keep in your house and you keep safe. But you've got 6 grand in your checking account, and 99% of what you do is wholly and completely in your checking account. But when you buy a house, you use a notary. You, like you use a wire transfer.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that's going to be the way to think about it. And I think there will be plenty of people who only ever do a few $100s worth or a few $1,000s worth, and they're on Lightning the whole time.
Yeah. So it seems like the security model of on-chain Bitcoin will always make things inherently a little bit more secure than Lightning, especially for larger amounts. But for most purchases, most times you want to buy stuff, most time you want a little spending balance. Um, Lightning security works just fine. So there's like a little bit of a security trade-off for a lot of a capacity, and therefore, in the end user's case, speed and cheapness
Mm-hmm.
benefit they get by doing a small security trade-off. But as long as they don't like have their big pot of life savings all in Lightning, then if they just have whatever they need for the foreseeable future, then it's all going to work out. And is that kind of the way you see the balance between the two worlds sort of working out?
Yeah, yeah, very much so. And uh, you also think about it that it's not explicitly, the security trade-off is really mostly one of time.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving up the you're giving up time in the exiting of a relationship on Lightning Network for the lack of time in doing payments in the interim.
Mm-hmm.
So I can do 10,000 payments while I've had this relationship established at the cost of, if this relationship goes sideways, it takes me a day to get out of it.
Mm.
Um, and I have to go to court. So it's kind of like, and it's similar. It's kind of like opening a banking relationship, except that it's non-custodial. You don't have to actually give your money to the bank. You just
Mm-hmm.
have to lock up your money with the bank for at a least, 1 day.
Yeah.
You're dedicated to using this service. Um, and So it's a way to create non-custodial service providers,
Mm-hmm.
people who, it's a semi-trusted relationship. You're not trusting them with the actual value. You're trusting them with a day's worth of your time
Yeah.
with that value. Um, I fully expect, and what's funny is that because it is that little bit of a trade-off, it's perfect for lower value transactions,
Mm-hmm.
because inherently a $5 payment takes a whole lot less trust than $100,000 one.
Yeah, of
Like,
course.
you don't need a tank to protect a $5 bill, right? You just need to stand near it.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
it doesn't make any sense to spend thousands of dollars or have this monstrous military machine, which is kind of the Bitcoin network. It's like having a freaking fortress around your money.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're making little payments and you got $100 on it, you just put it in your wallet and you stick it in your pocket. That's not super safe, but it's safe enough, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of like using a mobile wallet as opposed to just a hardware wallet. Obviously, it's not as secure, but you probably going to be a lot more convenient in using it like that.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it, we do this with all value.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is the same security model that we have with everything. Like when we carry around cash in our wallet, um, we don't also carry the stocks and treasury bonds, or the $10,000 stack of cash that we have in our safe. Like we don't keep the deed to our house in our wallet. Like we put those things in a metal safe in the closet and we don't touch them. We lock them away.
Yeah.
But if we go out shopping, we put $500 in our pocket. Not all of it. We don't bring all the value that we have in the world with us. We just take as much as we're willing to risk, potentially getting mugged, or, losing our wallet or something like that. It's a small amount that we go out to have greater flexibility and greater speed in using it.
Yeah. So this is where I get to a little bit of I guess, a ludicrous question or proposition. Not necessarily, but one of those pie in the sky type things, right? So if you
Yeah.
have Lightning, you have Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is, kind of not exactly what you want for everyday transactions. But Lightning is secure enough that for you to even having a few grand and spending money, it's going to work. What would a world look like if Bitcoin existed without the on-chain layer? If it just was birthed from Lightning, it was Lightning at the beginning. There was no Bitcoin miners, nodes, on-chain transaction. It was all just the second. The second layer was the only layer, right? It was all
Hmm.
kind of like that meme of like the astronauts of, wait, it was always Lightning. Don't
Yeah.
that kind of a thing. How would that work out? Do you think if there was just no main layer to settle on and it was just all through the Lightning network?
Then basically the Lightning Network would basically its security model would be non-existent, because
Mm,
it's simply because of the base layer security model that we actually know it's settled. So, if it's settling something that doesn't exist, or that, like, let's say it's settling something physical, then it really is an IOU, because you've got to do it custodial with somebody else, right?
yeah.
It's specifically because Bitcoin itself is non-custodial and contracts can be executed without trusting somebody else, that Lightning is decentralized and non-custodial. Um, it's basically as secure as whatever it is built on. So if this was built on banking, yeah, we'd get, instant transactions, maybe it would be really cool and useful and we could do some fun stuff with it, but we'd still be wholly trusting the bank. It wouldn't be a whole lot different than a debit card with services, with an API in which services could just use something in the middle. They could do some fun stuff with it.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty fascinating. So, thanks a ton for chatting with me. Where can people find more about what you do, how to follow you, and all your cool stuff like social media?
Yeah, yeah. I am. You can probably search it just with Guy Swann. And that's Swan with two N's on
Hmm.
Twitter. But my handle is at the Cryptoconomy. Obviously, you can get there through the podcast as well at Bitcoin Audible. And then my
Hmm.
newer show that is getting off the ground, I'm having a lot of fun with, is Shitcoin Insider. Um, yeah, we do both of those podcasts. Guyswan.com. You can actually get to all of it there. I usually have links to like my most recent stuff or like some popular videos and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
So yeah, you can get through all of that, and the main format of Bitcoin Audible is just there's a billion great articles out there. There's the lightning white paper. There's explanations of all of this stuff, and I read it out loud because ain't nobody got time to sit down and read all that crap. It's good stuff, but it's so much easier to listen to it in podcast form, and then I uh, explain it afterward for anything that was confusing or expand on the ideas and apply them to other pieces we've read. And I'm getting close to 500 reads,
It's a
um,
lot.
600 ish episodes. Been doing it daily for roughly daily for
Hmm.
almost 3 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's nice. It's a great body of work. Well, yeah,
Oh
I
yeah.
encourage everyone to go check that out and the podcast, and especially I will be listening to a few things of Shitcoin Insider from time to time, just see what all the smack talk's about, because I do enjoy some smack talk from time to time. But yeah, anyways, thanks a ton for being on, and yeah, I hope you have a good one.
Absolutely, Joel. Thank you. Appreciate it a lot.